Right, so back to the not so great America, and now we're into the 1950s. And after the recent formation of the CIA in the late 40s, America and the CIA were basically now just getting their bearings and finding their way around the world. At this time, they chose to avoid Western Europe because so shortly after World War II, the West Europeans had no stomach for more fighting or more violence. But there was plenty of other targets, places such as Korea and Vietnam and Russia and Cuba and the oil-laden Middle East, all targets of America's affections. So the CIA acted with this policy, which was simply to, when suited, fund rebels or fund governments and arm rebels in order to cause unrest around the world, basically to spread their seed of poison and sit back and wait for that poison to grow. But at the start of the 1960s, something happened which more or less put paid to their plans. And this came with the rise to power of John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, a great man, a statesman in every sense of the word, a man who came to power and would fight for peace, would fight for equality. He was well aware of the dark forces working behind him in the shadows, and he was willing to stand up to these dark forces and stand up to the bankers, the money men, and take back control of the Federal Reserve. In fact, he was a president who excited the American people, not just the American people, but people all around the world. He's the president who excited them the most of any president. He was not a perfect man, who is? And like a lot of politicians, it's claimed, and quite probably true, that he used his presidential position in order to satisfy his lust. But at least the targets of his lust were adult women, unlike many presidents who followed him, whose targets of depravity were young children, young boys, and young girls. So ultimately, anyway, John F. Kennedy was betrayed. He was betrayed by the CIA um, with the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And although he stood up as president and accepted blame, it's fairly obvious that it was a doomed mission, intentionally doomed to make him look bad. But even worse than this, he was betrayed by a large group of conspirators, many of whom very, very close to him. Think of modern day Julius Caesar and Brutus, and you'll get my point. So, on the 22nd of November 1963, to me, that's the day the real American dream collapsed, and collapsed for good. You see, John F. Kennedy was a danger to the hidden powers who up till then had operated in stealth in the background. But on the 22nd of November 1963, they came to the fore and basically confirmed their existence to the world. So, what should have been the start of a great dynasty for the American people, the greatest president ever, followed by his brother Bobby in time, was literally destroyed in 15 seconds. The length of time it took for 4 or 5 bullets to ricochet around Dealey Plaza. Shots that not only killed Kennedy, but pierced the last beating heart of the USA. Hard as it is to stomach the Kennedy assassination, it's even more difficult to stomach the aftermath, the laughable aftermath. The idea that Jack Ruby, the gangster, a profound Kennedy hater, shot the supposed Kennedy assassin in order to save Jackie Kennedy from the grief of having to watch a trial. And also the setup and the findings of the Warren Commission, again, laughable, or almost as bad as the 9/11 Commission, 40 years later. So, although it may seem that the passing of John F. Kennedy was the end of the American dream, there was still one glimmer of hope, and it came in the shape of his brother, Bobby. Now, Bobby was a good man, not as impressive or as obvious a statesman as his brother, but made from the same mould, and in fact even more keen than his older brother to do good. And this came about and was shown in his determination to quell organised crime in America. But alas, he was butchered as well himself less than 5 years after his brother. To basically round off the 1960s as the decade where America killed off all its great men, if you throw Martin Luther King into the equation as well. So ultimately, America went into the 1970s minus all these great men and entered in the 70s and 80s what I would describe as a period of mundane, corrupt presidents, the likes of Nixon and Ford and Carter and Reagan, with men with not one jot of inspiration between them, men who were basically just paving the way for a new dynasty which was being readied by the elite in America. And this new dynasty was going to be made up of the Bush family, as if things couldn't get any worse for America. So next I'll move on to this very same family. So until then, feel free to like, subscribe, share, and until then, take care.